And we're live with
Hey.
1 Miller at the moment, his Jeffness, the SP spouse,
Hello.
and we will be discussing the title of the episode of this video, Law and Disorder. Over to his Jeffness.
Yeah, and as the title was a little bit of a multi-meaning one as usual with Homicide, and to say right off the bat, even before I read the recap, that the reason why, or that it, one of those reasons is that it was the first episode that featured a character from the show Law and Order. At the beginning, when Detective Mike Logan from the NYPD, one of the main characters on Law and Order, appears transporting a prisoner from New York to Baltimore. The prisoner is played by filmmaker and actor John Waters, actually making his second appearance on Homicide. He first appeared in the first season episode Smoke Gets in Your Eyes as a bartender who was listening to Bolander's troubles. So, Law and Disorder was the 16th episode of the third season, originally aired on NBC February 24th, 1995, written by Bonnie Mark and Julie Martin and directed by John McNaughton. And because he responded to the call about the murder of Gordon Pratt, the prime suspect in the shooting of Bolander, Felton, and Howard, Tim Bayliss, is given the unpleasant task of investigating the murder. Despite his protests, Lieutenant Al Giardello orders Bayliss to question the other officers in the homicide unit, which makes him highly unpopular among his coworkers. No one in the unit considers Pratt's death to be unfortunate, and they all, to varying degrees, are offended by Bayliss's questions, despite the knowledge that he is merely following orders. The problem is compounded when G, dissatisfied by the investigation's dead end, orders Bayliss to double-check the detectives' alibis. Bayliss discovers that Munch has provided a false alibi. Actually, not established completely it's a false alibi, but anyway. Bayliss confronts Munch, who responds by defiantly providing an even weaker alibi and offering to let Bayliss examine his service firearm. Exhausted from having to question his fellow detectives, Bayliss chooses not to press the matter and later convinces G that the murder is unsolvable. Pembleton objects to Bayliss's questions in a more subtle way by choosing to not be his partner on the case. Instead, he takes the case of a woman shot dead in a parking lot and asks Lewis to partner with him on the case, a whim he soon regrets. At the scene of the crime, Meldrick and Frank are confused by the fact that no one saw the shooter or even heard a gunshot, and a witness expresses the opinion that it must be one of those black kids who go around shooting off guns. Pembleton points out that statistically, the witness is probably correct that the shooter came from the projects, while Meldrick is offended by Pembleton's assumption that the shooter is probably black. Meldrick also objects to Pembleton's method of starting the investigation by working their way down the list of registered handguns, pointing out that most crimes are committed by people with stolen or unregistered guns. At first, the detectives are surprised when Pembleton's list immediately leads to a woman who confesses to murder. However, the murder turns out to be unrelated to their case, as the confession comes from a woman who has shot her boyfriend 2 days before and mistakenly believes that Meldrick and Frank have come to arrest her. They eventually find the perpetrator in the parking lot shooting a little girl living 3 doors down from the victim, who took her father's gun from its cabinet and fired it into the air without knowing where the bullet would land. Afterward, Meldrick and Frank make peace by saying they caught the same case again. Each would investigate it exactly as he did this one. With all of his detectives either in the hospital or in other cases, Lieutenant Giardello takes a rare case and reluctantly agrees to partner with Felton, who begs to be put back on duty after his hospitalization. At the crime scene, Felton is visibly upset by the body, and G's initial concern is replaced with anger when Felton, more traumatized by his shooting than he admitted, loses his temper and shouts at G in the squad room. G bluntly tells Bo that the trauma is only the latest in a long line of excuses for substandard work as a detective, and that he hasn't been good enough for Homicide. The return of Bolander's memory prompts Munch to relax his vigil by Bolander's bed. Munch returns to the station to find himself the laughingstock of everyone who sees him. The reason why remains a mystery until Meldrick advises him to visit the art gallery across the street, where Munch discovers that the main exhibit is a giant nude photograph of him taken when he was a younger man. Munch confronts the artist. Turns out to be Brigida Svensson, a bitter ex-girlfriend seeking to humiliate Munch in revenge for him breaking her heart years ago. Brigida refuses to remove the photograph, but compromises by covering photographing Munch's genital area with a piece of paper. Unfortunately, their public argument draws even more attention to the photograph, which becomes the subject of a newspaper article, much to the chagrin of Bolander. Cultural references. The title is a reference to Homicide's sister show, Law & Order. The episode's cold open features a cameo from Detective Mike Logan, the character from Law & Order who meets with Pembleton to hand over a fugitive fled from Baltimore to New York City. Although the opening is unrelated to the events in the rest of the episode, it bears a narrative significance in linking the continuities of Homicide and Law & Order. Of course, over the next 4 years, Homicide would use more intricate storylines to cross over with Law & Order 3 more times. In addition, the character of Munch would be transplanted to the series Law & Order Special Victims Unit after the Homicide series finale. So, yeah, there you go. So, what do you think, Ben?
I think the various things I've got on my board here. There was a bit at the beginning with so this guy looks like a weirdo to me. He just got one of those faces. It's like a put on eccentricity.
Yeah, John Waters, also from Baltimore, and has made Baltimore the setting in several of his films and things that he's done.
I mean, it's realised everyone's got to have a gimmick, and that's his tash. Make himself recognisable. All right.
As I've been watching Law & Order recently, I've seen plenty of Detective Logan there on the right.
Right, and then we got to any of these particular people noteworthy. These names I'm going to be.
Yeah, Dana Ivey is the one that plays Bolander's ex-wife.
Right.
Harley McBride is medical examiner Dyer, who's the real-life wife of Richard Belzer. Julie Lauren, I'm not sure who is. And obviously that one says who she plays.
Yep. Right, and so you had stuff. There was a good line from right at the beginning. Tim Bayliss was a bit annoyed about having to do the Pratt case, and he was saying, "Look, it's pretty obvious that a cop could have done it." And then he talked about going through his wallet, and there was an unpaid ticket, and then the Munch said, in relation to who did the murder, the DMV. And then we had then there was a section in the. I just did a photo of this to show old arcade games.
DMV never forgets.
Yeah. Now, why would you pour like that? Why take those kind of absurd risks, you artisan, you Felton?
I liked that they had the sound of the arcade games. It was very nostalgic for me.
Ooh. Of course, this is setting up. Well, not just setting up that. Yeah. Hippie days.
Hopefully your sound is going through on the video.
Right, okay. Right, I'll now what I was gonna make this the thumbnail, but it didn't show up very well, so I'll probably just make it the one of a younger Munch.
Yeah, it's funny that the and I don't know if they chose it or whether it's just an automatically generated thumbnail, but for the episode this episode on YouTube, the thumbnail was actually that old lady from the restaurant that you showed in earlier.
But there's so many good ones because you could either do the guy in the freezer, you could do this old photo where it parody old photo where you got the three of them in the uniforms of the old Baltimore uniform. So that would be a good thumbnail as well. And then, of course, the more appropriate one is this one. Now, that's what I was going to ask you. So, also when he was younger.
I don't know. It doesn't look like, I mean, they acted like it was supposed to be like from the 60s or something. It doesn't look that old of a photo. Like,
no, it doesn't.
Too old for that to have been in the 60s. But it could have been previously taken. I don't know if it was made for the show or whether or not it was something he had taken, before that, but more recently than the 60s. I don't know. Since they never really showed a real, didn't have it on screen very long, so they probably didn't want people to zoom in on it like this and see that he didn't look that young.
Yeah.
And also sort of, one thing I thought was a little bit unrealistic is how quickly people who didn't know him recognized him. That seemed a little unrealistic to me, because even if you had stared at the picture for a while, he looks different enough, and he's got the glasses on and everything, where you probably wouldn't instantly recognize him.
Oh yeah, especially with his ears hidden.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the cops would have, because they know who he is. I mean, they work with him every day, so they're like, oh, and once they saw it was him, then that made sense. But for the ones that are just people coming to the art gallery, I thought they had them reckon. In fact, one guy, I don't know if it fault the actor or the director, but he basically makes his eyes bug out like he's surprised to see him before he really even turns to see him. So it's like he made his reaction way too fast.
Like this guy, was it?
Well, no, I was talking about somebody in the art gallery, but
oh, okay.
Like I said, it made sense for the cops to do that because they know who he is, basically. Anybody who's working in that area probably knows who Munch is. Has been there long enough. I mean,
and then you even got G getting in on the act. So
yeah, that part right there reminded me of there's a Simpsons episode where Homer's like tired of everybody laughing at him, or whatever, and he turns on the TV. Like and he says, TV respects me. It laughs with me, not at me. And when he turns on the TV, the first thing is a guy looking directly in the camera with pointing his finger and laughing. Like he's laughing at Homer. So that's what that reminded me of when G's laughing and pointing directly into the camera.
Right, so yeah, I think you're right. It does look like not an old photo. That it was because it's around the chin area and the cheeks. You can see the effects of aging.
Yeah, because I've seen some video of Belzer stand up from like 79, 80, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
and he looks younger to me and then than he does in that picture, so it makes me think it was probably since then.
It was supposed to be 25. That was supposed to be 25 years before.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris Noth and John Waters were the two actors in the opening, Logan from Law and Order and the prisoner.
Right. Is this a relative of
Yeah, I wondered that myself. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't remember who was Brewer. Was that the lady that
I've got a picture of her. She was rather dark-skinned. As dark-skinned as him. This guy? This woman?
That's what I was about to ask. Was her name Brewer?
Maybe.
Yeah, I couldn't remember what her name was, but...
Yeah. She got a similar jaw?
I'm going to have to check that out and find out.
I thought that's a good one. Not seen that one before. I can't remember it. If guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns.
That's a pretty common, like NRA or that type of group, thing. Dorada Kodo is indeed Yaphet Kodo's daughter.
Yeah, the jawline looks similar. I'll do the zoom image again. You can see the family resemblance.
So do you want me to read what David B226 Morris had to say about this?
Yeah, I just got a few more things. There's one bit where he said, right, so I've done the photo. Oh yeah, there was a funny bit with where you think you go in SJ Bolander, and then he goes and he's like, the main thing is that he's going on about the paper. Like, but the fact it's right there in the living section of the paper. That's what he was upset about. And we've done the weird guy at the front. We mentioned the paper. Oh yeah, and then there was a good bit where, do you want a beer? And they always like when they ask for a beer, they're never like specific about it. And that reminded me of an Alistair McGowan line where he would do where they were spoofing EastEnders, a British soap, and he would say, "I want a pint of non-specific, please."
Actually, on Homicide, though, they sometimes do mention specifics.
Very good. Very good.
So,
I'll give them an extra point.
In the very first episode, when Bayliss and Pembleton go into a bar, Bayliss says, "Give me a bow."
Oh yeah, I mean, you could at least make up a list of like 10 different fictional.
Yeah, that one's not fictional. It's and I don't think probably anyone they refer to is fictional, but that one.
Very good. So. Very good. I hope they got some cash from it. Right. So yeah, what's the name of the guy with his fantastic screen name that I can never remember? So that gives you an idea of how good I think it is. The fact that I can't remember it.
B226 Morris.
Was it David? What? Let's get this right. David what?
B226 Morris.
David B226 Morris. So if anyone watching this doesn't remember that, you can feel like a right chump, like me. David B226 Morris. Yeah,
and he puts it all together in one thing, which, back in the day, we all had to do screen names that way, before they ever allowed spaces in anything. And most of these reviews so far I've read of him look like they were written in 2005. So there was something I was going to say before.
You've got good reviews, though.
What?
You've got good reviews, though. Articulate.
Yeah, I think so. I don't always agree with him, but he does good. Makes sense in the stuff he says. I can't remember.
And if you're watching this, Mr. Morris, please join us.
Yeah. You said something else that distracted me from the thing I was going to say, but now I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll come back to me. I gotta switch over to get the review thing. Okay, so he titled it, Episode Gives Us Nothing, but It's an Interesting Nothing. Technically speaking, Law and Disorder isn't part of the 3-episode arc involving the detective's shooting storyline. The urgency of the previous episode is gone, and the overall tone is a lot more humorous than the previous 3 episodes. Yet the story is carried forward in a very meaningful way, and some even more troubling issues are brought to the front. Gordon Pratt, the man accused of shooting Bolander, Felton, and Howard, was found murdered at the end of the previous episode. As you might expect, nobody is very shaken up about it. Lewis, Munch, and Pembleton all basically shrug it off. Bayliss, however, is the primary and cannot dismiss it easily. However, the one person who might have been willing to help him, Giardello, basically leaves Bayliss to fend for himself and offers no real support whatsoever. Now, a year and a half ago in Black and Blue, G was enraged at Frank Pembleton's relentless pursuit of investigating his fellow police officers for murder. This time, when Bayliss tells him he suspects police involvement, G displays no emotion at all. In fact, when Bayliss asks to be left off the case, the lieutenant refuses. Even more surprising is the reaction of Pembleton. The man who has proclaimed that every life has meaning, even the criminal, seems utterly uninterested in solving Pratt's murder. In fact, he goes out on a call rather than work on it, leaving Bayliss stranded. In their minds, Pratt has transcended being the usual bad guy. This is justice, even if it is vigilante justice. So who did kill Gordon Pratt? We have no idea. Was it one of the detectives in the squad? The writers give us no clue. Okay, I'm going to skip that line.
Ooh. Now, you see,
Okay.
what you could do, Jeff, if you were a naughty person, which you're not, you could, like, build in stuff, like, to make it look like there's loads of spoilers and loads of things that are going to happen. Oh, I've got to skip this. Oh, that's something else I've got to skip, Ben. That's more surprises on the way.
Well, that's pretty much what I did, but
Yeah, but what I mean is, like, if you overdid it, like did it, like, twice as much as what you needed to do, then... But you're a good person, so you wouldn't do that.
As I've told you many times, Ben, there are no good or bad people. Everyone's the same. But anyway, as is no secret to our small but loyal audience, Pembleton and I have a lot of the same philosophies on things, and I like that this review he referred to Pembleton's earlier saying every life has meaning, and that's part of what struck me as kind of off about this episode, was that there were certain things I thought seemed a little bit out of character, and that was one of them. Anyway, to finish this, the question matters but will never be answered. The detectives have moved on to other things. Pembleton is back at work in full force. First, we see him in a very funny teaser picking up a fugitive from a New York City detective, Mike Logan from Law & Order, and they engage in a contest to the superiority of New York City over Baltimore or vice versa. Then he goes out on a call with someone who is nearly as disagreeable, Meldrick Lewis. The woman is killed in the front of a supermarket from a gunshot which seemed to come from overhead. Two detectives vehemently disagree how to pursue the investigation. Frank wants to look on the poor section of the street. Meldrick wants to investigate the more affluent people on the other side of it. Eventually, they find out the shooting was an accident. A girl from the rich section of town fired the gun in the air, and the stray bullet killed her. That's not written well. The stray bullet killed the woman in the parking lot. Anyway, the two of them never agree even after they find the killer. And that's not even really true either. They sort of did, unless Lewis was being sarcastic, because he does say he would have pursued the case the same way.
Quite a few people don't know that if you shoot a bullet up into the air and on the way it's down, it can come down with such velocity.
Oh, yeah.
Because it has just such a long way to go that can become lethal.
So, I mean, quite a few hunting accidents occur that way, not from someone going Dick Cheney on someone and hitting him in the face, but in shooting up at something and then hitting someone on the way down.
Yeah, how badass is Dick Cheney and then makes the other guy apologize for getting shot?
Another man back is Beau Felton, the least seriously wounded of the three detectives. He has wheedled the superiors into going back to work. He's eager to get back into the saddle until he goes out on the street on a call. This leads to G giving Felton a royal chewing out about how unfit he was for the job before he was shot. Felton is feeling more stressed than expected. But having a worse day by far is Detective Munch. Those of us who might have suspected that Munch was a member of the counterculture are proved correct when a nude photograph of Munch is prominently displayed in an art museum across the street from his squad. Everyone finds this hysterical except for Munch. Turns out the artist Brigida used to be one of Munch's girlfriends and takes this opportunity to exact revenge on him for breaking up with her. Things get even worse for Munch when she alters the photograph only to have Munch's name and face appear in the newspaper the next day, something which upsets his partner a great deal. But I liked that because, like Munch said, he got what that was. Like that was Bolander's way of showing that he cared, even though he blamed it on the drugs. He's back to he's not going to come out and say something affectionate towards Munch, but the fact that he acted like he was worried about him, and did it in his own way of complaining about what he did, was he Munch has that knowing smile of he knows that's Stan's way of showing affection to him.
Yeah.
With a fine mixture of comedy and drama, including a funny scene in which Frank and Meldrick stumble across a murderess while investigating a completely different case, fine acting, including a memorable cameo by John Waters, and some very troubling moments, Law and Disorder is a fine way to wrap up what has been a very well-written arc. Some questions we will never be satisfactorily answered, but that is how life on the street is sometimes. My score, 8.75.
Now, what I would have done, but that would be me being a little bit naughty, is I would have had it being one of the cops had shot, but then nobody ever finds out. But the audience would see it.
Yeah, well, I'll be, like you said, naughty and say, stay tuned for future episodes of Homicide.
Very good. Very good.
This will not be the last time that this is referred to, even though
Very
that
good.
review said at the conclusion of an arc. It sort of is, but like I said, things don't ever completely conclude, and stuff keeps going along after that. So.
Well, the thing is, though, is that I have to remember that we have to stay somewhat within the reality of how corrupt the police can be. I mean, for instance, in Blake 7, you can go like you can go much more corrupt and much more sinister. But there is a level where the audience are watching it, where it's like, like you complain sometimes about soaps where it can get like that extra level of melodramatic. So there are certain things. So Homicide does go to the edge, but it can't go conspiracy theory crazy in terms of melodrama.
Yeah,
there's a certain limit that it does well. It never goes too far. That I've seen.
Again, I'll refrain from spoiling something and saying that there may be a couple of times where they do go too far, in my opinion. But one thing I would say, though, is in relation to he mentioned the episode Black and Blue in that review, and
that was a very good one.
And that was an episode that did get a response from actual Baltimore police people who felt like it was too critical or painted the police in too bad a light. But I don't remember hearing anything about this episode, getting any kind of response that way. So I suppose maybe they struck a balance in leaving that suspicion of it being likely that a cop shot him, but not. But the fact that they didn't show it, like Ben would rather have them do, may have actually, given them more positive response from the police department. But this is not one of my favorite episodes, and I felt like there were a few problems with it. I didn't really care about the side plot with Munch. I didn't find it that funny. I mean, all that just seems sort of silly for no good reason to me, although I did like the thing with Bolander reacting to it. I, in fact, would have liked to have seen more scenes between them and lots of some of the other stuff. But I did think it seemed, and maybe the writers were trying to say that there are certain things that sort of get people out of their normal way of looking at things, but it did seem that there was a little bit of out of character for everybody in terms of, I mean, not everybody, but in Pembleton and saying, we're the good guys. He's usually the last one to use that kind of thing as a defense. Although I still thought Andre Braugher did a great job of acting it, and even the little sort of flourishes. We've talked before about his way of sort of being dramatic and in his way. Where when he's talking with Lewis, he kind of does this extra hand gestures and movements and stuff. The way he always puts this little dramatic flourish on things, and so all of that was very in character for Pembleton. But what the actual stuff he said to Bayliss was a little bit. It's kind of struck me as being kind of off, and G's reaction to it also in terms of. But maybe that's what they were trying to say, because earlier in the episode, he's telling Lewis and Pembleton, close the case, close the case, close the case, and then to Bayliss he says, some cases get closed, some don't. So he has this very different attitude in the way he says it, which on the one hand seems inconsistent, but then I guess if I give him the benefit of the doubt, they're saying that there are certain things that cause people to sort of forget their usual way of looking at things.
So basically, an hour or two with the script editor going through it could have just tweaked a few lines back into character. That's all it would have taken.
Yeah.
Or even the director on set talking to the actors.
I kind of feel that way. Like the one line that Bolander's ex-wife says, he never really had a good memory. I'm like, that's counter to everything they've established about the character so far. It's like one of the things he's best at is the fact that he has a good memory. That's and the character. I mean, the real life person that Bolander was based on, more than anything else, is known for his memory and the fact that he never forgets faces and all that. So they could have had the same thing about him losing the memory because of the brain injury, and stressed the fact that it was actually very, that he was struggling with it because he normally does have such a good memory. So I thought it was weird to have his ex-wife have a line about him never having a good memory when that didn't seem to be true. So that's a line I would have struck or changed if I was in charge of it. So,
what I might have done is I might have had Stanley be slightly different after the brain injury. Like a little slight personality change.
I think he is a little bit, and we'll see more of that coming up. I'll just leave it at that. So that I think it's handled better going forward, but this episode was a little bit disjointed in my opinion.
Were the two writers, like I think Julie Martin had done one before, was this like the first time that combo had been used?
Maybe, because Bonnie Mark was one of the teleplay writers on the previous one, I believe. One of the last two, anyway. I can't remember if it was Dead End or End Game. One of the two ends. I think she was one of the writers, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to tell the audience, just a little thing is, dramatic. I quite like dramatic irony, and dramatic irony is the opposite of mystery. So dramatic irony is when the audience knows more than the characters.
Yeah,
and
I prefer mystery myself.
I like a combo of the two.
Yeah, which is why, another thing that I'm listening to these days is, and have been off and on for several years, is the Adventures of Superman radio show from back in the 40s. And already the episodes that are the best of that show that I've heard, they stand out because they're the ones that don't have the scenes where you hear the villains telling you exactly what their plot is.
Yeah.
To me, that always makes it less interesting than when the audience is trying to do the same thing Clark Kent is and figuring out what's going on. He's sort of filling the role of investigating for the audience's sake also, and everything that they come to is suspense, as opposed to you cut to a scene of the bad guys saying, okay, here's the plan.
Well, to me, when I hear a plan outlined, then I think, wait a minute, it's not going to go to plan. Because otherwise it's repetition.
Well, right, it never completely does, but I prefer so far in
yeah, you don't need to do the plan. You just go straight. You can see what's happening.
Yeah,
writers need to remember that.
In re-listening to these ones from the beginning, my favorite story I believe that I've heard so far. There's a bunch of them, so it's hard to keep track of all of them. But they had so many episodes. But the story that I've liked the best so far was the one called The White Plague, and it was one that was set, I don't know, somewhere Alaska or somewhere up north, where it was like a logging camp, and there was somebody basically that was faking something that that was supposed to be like it was like a ghost that was doing something to somebody, but it was really somebody had their own agenda. But anyway, the point is that Clark Kent had to figure out everything and kind of reveal it in the last episode. So it was more like one of those mysteries where you've got the investigator who reveals the plot in the final episode, which I like better than having all of that be obvious from the start.
So one of the things I like with dramatic irony is that you can have sometimes have more of a focus on the acting and the emotion, because it's like you can it's like, oh, we know this character, we know something about this character that the others don't know, and you can sort of like see it on your face and little subtleties of it. And so depending on how the story is structured, it's then a story using dramatic irony can have more of a focus on the emotions. And of course, if you whereas mystery, if you go for a pure mystery, it's like it's purely a cognitive. Well, if you want to get you don't just want it to be a cognitive thing of a mind game of like how did they do this, but get emotion in it as well. And that's one of the good things about crime as a genre, is that you're able to combine the emotions with the game of working out who did it. That's probably why it probably is the most successful genre in all fiction.
Homicide uses some of both of those, obviously, but overall, as I have been watching Law and Order recently, I can say that more often on Homicide, we're kind of in the same boat as the detectives in that we don't witness the crime. We're if we're trying to figure it out, it's along with the detectives from the clues that they're given, as opposed to Law and Order frequently shows either the crime happen or it shows, enough of the immediate aftermath that you get an idea of who did it right from the start. There's not a whole lot of twists when it comes to that. Whereas Homicide usually starts with, you're in the same spot the detectives are, where you're getting, okay, here's the body, here's the clues that we're, getting about it, here's witnesses if there were any such, and you sort of have to figure it out as you go along.
And that makes us connect with the characters, I think, because we're seeing things more from the character's point of view. So right. I do like that version as well. Anyhow,
and I liked sort of the one aspect of this episode I liked was the Lewis and Pembleton interactions.
Yeah.
And the way that they kind of went through how they approached it differently, but that they were both right and both wrong about different things. But it demonstrated. I liked the fact that the show didn't really take sides. It showed both of them are good detectives, and they both have their little quirks and egos and issues, and they all kind of deal with them.
We've got Uncle Frank.
Yeah.
Because there's always that little thing where there's like there are two different sides of the black spectrum, in that you've got Lewis, who's an Ebonics guy, and Pembleton speaks very proper.
Yeah, he's the classically educated New Yorker, and which is why that first scene was kind of funny, because it's like he was the one defending Baltimore, but of course he also went from New York to Baltimore, so it's like it sort of made sense him saying, that he went to left and went to Baltimore too, but
He'd be at home in Blake 7 with Pembleton.
But anyway, I liked those little elements that I think no matter who is writing or what, whether the story itself, flows as well, the acting is still good, and those little moments that, they do a good job of establishing their characters. And I think both Clark Johnson and Andre Braugher are really consistent with that, with those characters. Like there's never a time where, to me, their way of acting ever seems to lose that hold on the character. They both
very good
throughout the show, and so I enjoy their interactions on the few occasions that they get to partner with each other. This won't be the last one. There's a couple more instances of that occurring in the future.
Oh no, that's a little spoiler there, Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
They'd go together forever and be like married. Oh well.
Well, and a lot of I can say this, that I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that a lot of storyline over the course of Homicide is about interaction of partners, and with Bayliss and Pembleton are the two that's probably explored the most, because we get the most scenes of them talking to each other, and a lot of stuff comes out between the two of them over the time that they're partnered and sometimes estranged from each other for whatever reason. So
there were no scenes in this that really dragged.
No, I agree. I think it was well paced. Everything seemed to they packed a lot into one episode, actually.
And yeah,
it was actually quite a contrast to an episode like Every Mother's Son, where you have kind of long extended, a scene kind of goes on for a while because they're really sort of milking the drama out of that interaction. And this one was a little bit more faster paced, and you had more cuts away from the scene as opposed to longer scenes. So I can like some of both. I don't automatic for one or the other. Sometimes a story is more effective one way or another.
Oh yeah.
Obviously something like 3 Men and a Dina, which again, another element I liked of this episode was the reference to that case from Bayliss. Many times he refers back to his first case, the Dina Watson case. He mentions that, as well as Annabella Wilgus. But in that, of course, you have the ultimate extreme of basically the whole episode is one scene, as opposed to an episode that cuts between a ton of different scenes. And you'll see some episodes in the future that have pretty close to the extreme of that, where it's a constant shifting, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and that's better than other shows where it's like you fit the material to the structure. It's better to get more variety by changing the structure to fit the material, but that would demand more skillful writers who are able to write in different structures.
Yeah, and I think you can do that. You can write in a way in such that you write the sort of the stories separately as whole things, and then you kind of mix them up. You cut it up in a way that makes sense and flows as a story, or as an hour of television. So, John McNaughton, the director of this one, has obviously directed several episodes before this, and seems to me to do a good job of all of those little elements in terms of the pacing and the cutting between scenes and getting different shots of the actors in different angles and all that stuff. The other storyline that I didn't really mention much was, Felton coming back. I liked some of the elements of that. I felt for him again when G kind of ranted at him, because I thought, hey, where's this coming from? I kind of felt for Felton, like, yeah, he really did. It is his first day back. He could give him a little bit of a break. He kind of goes personal with attacking. His marriage has been falling apart. That was kind of a low blow.
I mean, because he could have mentioned, is all this because I don't wear a tie, Mr. Sneakers?
Yeah, I mean,
Mr. Tennis Shoes.
I don't have a problem with him getting upset at Felton for things that, it's sort of legitimate for him to be upset about. But I thought that one, he seemed like he went a little bit personal for no real reason. But the only thing I can sort of say, I can sort of find in that and say what he was trying to do, if he felt like he was trying to motivate Felton to kind of snap out of the funk, and that was the way he felt like would impact him the most, is if he got personal with him. That's all.
What with me? The opposite response.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with some people it would have, which is why I think he probably wouldn't have used the same tactic with maybe Lewis or Pembleton, but maybe with Felton, he's thinking that will shake him up enough for him to kind of get better. We'll see.
Yeah, because the audience would have thinking, hang on a minute, Felton was doing pretty well. He was closing cases with Kay Howard.
Yeah.
Another
thing about this episode is Kay wasn't in it at all, so she's missing from this episode.
No fee for her.
Yeah, she's referred to as being in the hospital, but and Bo gives her a call, but you don't actually see her in the episode. So.
Yeah, no fee for her, but I'm sure she's doing fine. The actress.
Well, I'm as a main cast member, she was on salary, so she got paid whether she was in the episode or not.
Ooh.
But Yeah, so I guess it's time for our ratings, unless you had something else you wanted to say about it.
The ratings is tricky for me because I don't really know what kind of like guidelines I'm using.
Well, you sort of previously gave me sort of a guideline that you used in terms of you sort of started from 10 and then subtracted points for certain things.
Yeah, that's a consistent way of doing it. I think it feels like a 7.
All right.
There was nothing in it that annoyed me.
Well, as I stated, there were a few things that annoyed me.
Yeah, but you know more about the characters and the consistencies and
True.
that sort of thing.
But I'm trying to look at it and isolated it in an episode, or at least up to this point. It's hard to do when you've seen future episodes. I know, but I just look at my overall enjoyment level is really the way I look at it. So I give this one a 6 out of 10 because to me it's like I know they can do better. It's the way I look.
That's
6
the
is
thing.
still 6 is still a score that says I enjoyed this. It was not in any way. I didn't feel like it was in any way a waste of my time watching it. It still has lots of good elements in it. But to me, this is an episode where the episode is carried by the fact that the actors are good, and not really in the story itself.
And so the picture of Munch is funny. The picture of Munch is funny with the hairstyle.
I didn't really find it funny. It just seemed kind of boring and useless to me. I could have skipped that entire plot personally. So yeah, didn't do anything for me in that. I don't really care about that stuff at all. And I felt for Munch a little bit with everybody like laughing at him. It hit my feelings a little bit there because I don't like when somebody is being made fun of and they're not in on the joke.
Yeah, that almost seemed like out of character, especially from G, to be like that. It was almost as if the way he acted G there would be as if Munch was having a kind of dream and like G was acting slightly out of character.
Yeah, it did seem very much like the the classic you're at school in your underwear dream or whatever. It seemed the way it was treated. It seemed out of place with the rest of the episode too in some ways. Like it seemed that's why when I would rewatch these, I'd forgotten that that happened in the same episode as the other stories because it didn't seem to be related to anything else. So it did seem to jump around a little bit with that. So.
Also, the reaction might be wrong because G is a guardian, and he might not be too happy about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually think that Bolander's reaction, what seemed the most realistic, in that way, that G would have been a little bit more concerned about it, But I mean, I don't think it was out of character for. For Lewis to react the way he did. I mean, he wasn't really over the top with his reaction. He was.
That was in character, yeah.
Yeah.
Lewis, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that was like a dream from Giardello, yeah.
So anyway, Homicide is one of my favorite shows ever. So I still enjoy watching any episode of Homicide. I don't think there's any bad ones. However, this is definitely not one of my favorites. It fits. It fills the bill as far as continuing certain stories that go on, but this one is not one that I ever feel eager to rewatch. So.
Yeah. Right, there we go then. So it's goodbye from me.
All right, and join us next time for. I think the next one is The Old and the Dead, if I remember right, but I could be mixing up. I'm not having it right in front of me, so. Actually, I can find out in just a second. Yeah, The Old and the Dead. So, which in my opinion is a better episode than this one. And that's all I'll say about it at this point.
Right. So should I stop the broadcast now?
Sure. Bye bye.
No.